Welcome back. Well, it's cold out here in Canada today. Last night it was minus 44 Celsius. Well, today is 2024, January 14th. And just a few days ago on Wednesday, Jehovah's Witnesses took Spain to court. Do you think they're kind of upset at Spain because they lost the association's court case? The judge called them an extremist and a religious sect. It was in the headlines all over Spain. So now all over the headlines in Spain is that JW Org is mad. They're angry. They're taking Jehovah's Witness. They're taking them to court. Let's see what happens here. Let's get right into the news. Here it is. It's on the headlines. In Spain, Jehovah's Witnesses take Spain to court over her life-saving blood transfusion. So the organization does it all. They hire the lawyers. They're protecting it. They have the HLC in there watching her. Even if she wanted to take a blood transfusion to live, she couldn't because there's too many people watching. And they hold their blood thing very serious. After we do the news, we're going to get right into the blood doctrine, and we're going to look at it through Watchtower Helper's eyes. And so here we go. Jehovah's Witnesses take Spain to court. The European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg will hear the woman's complex case after a Madrid hospital gave her blood transfusion against her will, but with the approval of a duty judge. So the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, will today, 10th of January, hold a public hearing to investigate the case of Jehovah's Witnesses who reported Spain to the court because a hospital in Madrid gave her blood transfusion against her will, but with approval of the duty court. According to this Strasbourg court, it will hear the allegations of the Ecuadorian woman who lives in Soria. That is a Jehovah's Witness. She is absolutely opposed to the blood transfusions and the donation and the storage of blood and the blood products. Of course she is in the newspaper at this point. She's alive, so she can say all that stuff, right? It's all about a lawsuit. The woman received a blood transfusion in Madrid hospital in 2018 due to hemorrhaging. She would have died. This woman would have been dead. This would have not been a case. JW Org wants their people to die. They want their people to die, and it's not biblical. We'll get into that. In 2017, she had been recommended to undergo surgery when she signed an advance directive, a power of attorney, and informed consent document. In all three, she underlined her refusal to receive blood transfusions of any kind, even if her life was in danger, but agreed to accept any medical treatment that did not involve the use of blood. In 2018, she was admitted to the Soria hospital, but due to hemorrhaging, she was transferred to Madrid. The doctors, on learning that she was a Jehovah's Witness, contacted the judge on duty for instructions. The corresponding judge, who was unaware of the patient's identity and the wishes, authorized all medical procedures necessary to save her life. And the same day, surgery was performed and the blood transfusions were administered without the patient being informed of her court order, even though she was still conscious when she was taken to the operating theater. In the course of the proceedings, the parties still dispute whether or not the woman was fully lucid at the time. She did not agree with the duty judge's decision and appealed, but the court upheld the decision. And before going to the ECHR, the woman took the matter to the Constitutional Court, who declared her claim inadmissible. So she took her complaint to the Strasbourg against Spain for alleged violation of respect for privacy and freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, both of which are protected by the European Convention on Human Rights. So when I read all of this, I know this is not the individual doing any of this stuff. This is a way above anybody's head to go to court. You're laying in bed, you just about died, and you're going to all of a sudden take everyone to court? This is Jehovah's Witnesses. This is JW.org. They're pissed off at Spain, and they're going to try to create a big ruckus over this. The doctor saved her life. JW.org wants people to die. They want their members to die in worship of the idols, the 9 men in New York. because those 9 men went against what Russell said, went against what the organization said about blood. We're going to cover all of that, folks. This is our next article. So that's the news here today. And JW Org, Jehovah's Witness, they say it's a Jehovah's Witness, but it's JW Org doing it all for this lady. She's in bed, recovering. She's alive. She can see the birds out the window. But all she has in her is anger. She wanted to die. She wanted to die because she worships 9 men in New York. 9 men. They worship those men. Because the Bible does not tell you that you cannot receive a life-saving medical treatment that includes blood. Even the organization has changed their view on this and said, okay, you can do fractions, you can do this, it's conscientious, but you just can't use whole blood. Well, sometimes whole blood's necessary in this kind of a situation because there's nothing else out there that'll carry the oxygen to the body to keep a person alive. So this is the medical treatment today. We're going to get into this, and we're going to go to Watchtower Help Club. I'm going to take you right over there. Now, if you don't know who Watchtower Help Club is, this is an individual that used to work in Bethel. Now, he goes by the pseudonym Frank, because of Watchtower's shunning policy. They say that it's okay, but here's a guy that left Bethel and ran for his life. He can't talk about anything. He has to do everything under a pseudonym because of the shunning policy and because of the damage it would do to his business and his livelihood and his family and whatever else. This is why we know the shunning policy is so bad. So now let's get into the blood issue. It's even worse. It kills people. Shunning policy also kills people. The Jehovah's Witness blood issue resolved, part 3. Now Frank did an 8-part study on this. I'm going to pin this article, this one page, to the description below, and from there you can find all 8 pages. You can go over it. He's dissected this blood thing in and out, one side up, one side down. It's solved. He's done 8 pages, 8 documents. He was working in Bethel. This guy's a writer. He's got several books he's written. Very talented, but he has to hide. He's done videos. If you go to his website, he's done a video on the blood, and I'll pin that at the end here too. Now, when it comes to quoting the Bible as is also the case with most other sources, the content is often misleading when we neglect to take into account the context. And when the Bible is quoted by the Watchtower, an organization notorious for twisting the words of others, context is not only important, but as we'll see, context is king. On its website, the Watchtower gives 3 Bible verses as the basis for its anti-blood stance, as well as a side in which they cast doubt on the medical efficacy of the blood transfusions. If I said that right. Now, these are this is right out of jw.org. The quote is right here. You can click there and get all of this stuff. And it's the same old. They quote Genesis 9 and 4 about Noah and his family and the blood, and Leviticus 17 and 14, you must not eat blood. And then they go to the New Testament, Acts 15 and 20. And why does God command us to abstain from blood? And they get into it. So we will consider the medical reasons in part 7 of this series. Right now, let's look at these 3 Bible verses one at a time in context. And that's all we're going to do. You can go further and look at some of his other papers on this. Genesis 9 and 4. And I'm not going to read it all. And it is quoted from the New World Translation. Instead of isolating verse 4 of this chapter of Genesis, the Watchtower does. So let's consider the first 16 verses. So you see, the Watchtower just takes one verse. So Frank's going to take 16 verses on the noahide command. That's what Genesis is about, is Noah. The noahide command it's discussed as. So God went on to bless Noah and his son and to say to them, be fruitful, become many, and fill the earth. And in this noahide command, he talks about blood. I'm not going to read it all. He says, besides that, I will demand on every accounting of your lifeblood. And he says the blood, he says anyone shedding blood, man will his own blood be shed. That's the rule: eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? Blood's if you shed someone's blood, if you kill someone, you see. So the Watchtower wants to put people in the hospital and have them kill themselves over blood. You see, that's manslaughter, in my opinion. Now, as for you, he goes on to say, God said to Noah and to his sons, with them I am now establishing my covenant with you and with your offspring. And it goes on to talk about it, his covenant here. And he talked about a number of things. So what we're going to do is go to Frank's, how Frank deciphers it. He says, the first thing to note is that the everlasting covenant has nothing to do with abstaining from blood, but is simply God's promise to all creatures of the earth never to destroy all flesh again by flood and to set up a rainbow as a sign of his promise. See, it's not about abstaining, it's about killing the blood, the blood going to the ground and so forth, killing someone. And when you have an animal, it said bleed them, let the blood go to the ground. So there's nothing about medical treatments or saving a life, nothing in there. Number one, a fear of humankind will pervade all non-human animals. Number two, every moving animal that is alive may serve as food. On accounting will be demanded from every living creature. Only flesh with its life, its blood you must not eat. And anyone shedding man's blood by man will his own blood be shed. And number six, be fruitful, become many, increase abundancy on earth. Frank goes on to say, however, the Watchtower ignores all of these rules other than the rule number 4. Rule number 4 is the one on the blood, right? You must not eat it. So rule number 4, they focus in on. That's it. So though they insist that they are following the universal law given to Noah and his descendants, they really are not. Since they are not following any of the other rules, there's no logical reason to single out rule number 4 and claim that it's binding on everyone today. Let's look in detail as these 6 rules one by one. And I'm going to kind of breeze through this. This is on the noahide command. A fear of humankind will pervade all non-human animals. If the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses really think this supposed noahide law, or in Watchtower Erroneous speaks everlasting covenant, is binding to this day, then I'd like to see them make a public demonstration of their faith in this doctrine by fearlessly approaching man-eating tiger or swim in shark-infested waters. He's got a picture of Stephen Lett here fighting off a tiger and Tony Moritz inside a shark's mouth. Every moving animal that is alive may serve as food for humankind. So will we be seeing puffer fish and poisonous dart frogs on the Bethel menu anytime soon? An accounting will be demanded from every living creature. Number 3, an accounting, right? So Frank's saying, Watchtower should be putting on their timesheets animals killed and eaten. So along with reporting the hours spent witnessing each week, do Jehovah's Witnesses also turn in an account of the number of animals they have killed and or eaten? If not, it would seem that God's organization is failing in helping to organize this accounting. That's part of the noahide command. If you're going to use the noahide command, here it is. Use it. Now, number 4, only a flesh with its life, its blood, you must not eat. Note that despite the Watchtower assumes that this is not a prohibition on eating blood, it's a prohibition on eating flesh that has blood in it. Jews understand this to mean that the one is not to take a bite out of a living animal's flesh and swallow it. That's what that means. And this is about the Jewish conscience. That's what we're going to get into. It's not about the rest of the world, the Gentiles. It's about the Jews and the commands that we're giving to them. Number 5, anyone shedding man's blood by man will his own blood be shed. Countless men have shed man's blood throughout history. Not all of them have had their blood shed in turn. More importantly, not one of them has had their blood shed by God's organization on earth. So once again, one of the rules is not only being broken, but has never been considered as binding on Jehovah's Witnesses this side of Armageddon, shedding man's blood. So, but I look at Watchtower having HLC in that hospital. People are dying by refusing blood, by refusing a medical treatment. And to me, that's shedding blood. That's killing a good life. Look at this witness lady. She's alive now, and she can sue the hell out of Spain. with the Watchtower. They can just have lots of fun working at a lower energy. They call that a heel, or working at hell. And when you're working at your heel, you're working down below and you're angry and you want to sue everyone and you want to go out and get vengeance upon everyone. You see, once we start to work up, our energy goes up and it's up to God. And that's how we talk to God. We get our energy up. We can't be down here suing people and be angry over life that was given to us by a doctor who tried to help. That's all the doctor was trying to do, save that woman's life. That's what they're trained to do. Now he's getting sued. Wow. They're suing the country, I guess. We'll see what happens. Now here's number 6, be fruitful, become many. It's a noahide law, increase abundantly on earth. Far from following this rule, Watchtowers actually encouraged witnesses to forego having children. Face the facts, 1938 Watchtower. Would it be scripturally proper for them to a great multitude, aka great crowd, now to marry and begin rearing children? Put that question out, make people feel guilty. Watchtower 2016. Thousands of young Christian men and women are willingly sacrificing marriage or not having children, at least for now, in order to serve serve Jehovah. That's what they say. That's what they pump out. Now, since the Watchtower is inconsistent and doesn't appear to know what it's talking about, please turn to Wikipedia. We're not going to do that. You guys can. There's a link there. To find out what is really meant by the Noahide laws. Not surprisingly, it has nothing to do with Gentiles abstaining from blood. Now, if the Noahide law had meant that Gentiles were under an order to abstain from eating blood, then we would not find this Mosaic law which permitted Jews to sell unbled meat to them. Interesting. You must not eat any animal that was found dead. You may give it to the foreign residents who's inside your city. So the Jews, you see, they could give this unbled animal to others. They could sell it, make money off it. So it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't as big of a deal as Watchtower makes it out to be. And it says, and he may eat it, or it may be sold to a foreigner. You see? So this unbled animal, we're looking at principle here, full of blood, can get sold to the meat market and be cut up and fed to people. And if you're a Christian, we're going to get into that in a bit. If you're a Christian, you can actually go in and eat that meat. You can eat meat with byproducts in it. Watchtower said you couldn't. That's what I was told, but you can. And that changes the whole thing, folks. Leviticus, we're going to cover Leviticus 17 and 14. This verse is part of the Mosaic law, the law given to Moses, aka the law covenant. As such, it is completely irrelevant to Christians today because according to Watchtower, Christians are not under the Mosaic law. Here it is, Watchtower September 1st, 2005. Christians are no longer under the law covenant, Galatians 3 and 24. The Watchtower excuses itself for even introducing the Leviticus verse into the argument because, according to them, it shows how seriously God viewed the law against eating blood. But if that's true of this Mosaic law, then it must be equally true for the other 612 laws, which make up the body of the law. For instance, if Jehovah's Witnesses are going to take this law seriously, then they better burn any polyblend clothing they may possess, because it's against the law. You can only have one type of blend, like all cotton. You can't have a blend, according to that law. And that they may possess and stone their sassy children. So that's what the law says. If you have children that are lipping you off, you throw them out there and you stone them. You kill them. That's what the law says. And start sacrificing goats. So maybe Watchtower, instead of sacrificing their members, should start sacrificing goats and follow the law properly. That's what I think. Okay. I'm just going to turn the lighting down a bit there. Now, Acts 15 and 20 is the next one we're going to get into here. This is probably the main scripture that Jehovah's Witnesses use, because it's in the New Testament. It's the one I used to use when I was a Jehovah's Witness. And it was my go-to scripture, because I knew all that old law stuff. We weren't under it. I knew that. And when I was out in the ministry talking to people, I talked to all kinds of people, Presbyterians, Catholics, and sometimes we get into this. All those other, and everyone that knows the Bible knows that the old commands are part of the Jewish command. You know, there's some principles there. Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to find principle, but it doesn't work like that. And they're missing it, because we're going to find this here in Acts 15 and 20. So, although the Watchtower claims that this verse means that God gave Christians the same command that he has given Noah, such is not the case. When we read the context of this verse, we see that it is not God issuing a commandment. God's not issuing a commandment here. That's what he's saying. But rather, a decision is reached by a person named James. That's what's going on here. So here's some bullet points to consider. Who were his hearers, James, and who was the decision meant for? What was the culture at the time and the place? And under what circumstances what was the decision arrived at? And how binding was it meant to be, and upon whom? And for how long did James mean for it to be in effect? And what was the reason for arriving at this decision? Well, not to mention who wrote this account down and what the reasons, what reason do we have for thinking he wrote it down accurately, or that it has lost nothing in translation. And then why should we accept this person named James as the authority whom we must obey today? Like, James isn't Jesus. You know, he's not even the apostle. Paul actually goes on, and we're going to talk about how he corrects, kind of straightens that counsel out a bit. Now, it turns out that we can get some answers from the other chapter in question. It begins by setting the stage and tell us exactly what motivated James's decision. So, what prompted James to write this part of the Bible? Now, here it is, Acts 15 and 1. Now, some men came down from Judea and began to teach brothers, unless you get circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. Remember that? The Jews were telling the Gentiles that. It says these men were known as Judaizers. You know, you probably know a few Judaizers in the Watchtower. They're just fault picking, you know, looking for fault finding. Well, that's what these guys were. And they taught that Christians needed to follow the Mosaic law. And in order to appease these men, James decided to caution Gentile Christians against publicly violating the more publicly obvious of the Jewish customs, such as engaging in lewd behavior and eating meat sacrificed to idols or meat that had not been properly bled. You see, folks, there was no medical treatments to save one's life back then. So what we're talking about here is blood within the animal. So Jehovah's Witnesses are taking the stance that blood has to be drained out, so therefore you can't use it for medical treatments. Like, this is their argument. We're looking at the whole story. Now, after rendering his decision, James made clear that the above was indeed his motivation by stating in Acts 15 and 21. He says, "For from ancient times Moses had those who preach him city after city, because he is read aloud in the synagogues on every Sabbath." So from ancient times, Moses had those preach city to city. So if we take in more context of the Bible, we see that James was not laying down laws here to be binding on Christians for all the time. What authority would he have had to do so? None at all, if we take some other scriptures true. Okay, so we're going to look at some scriptures here. This one in Romans. This is right from the Watchtower, if we were to look at it. Romans 13, 8 to 10, do not owe anything except to love one another. For whoever loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law. For the law code, and this is the law, folks, these are laws. These are not what Acts 15 talks about. These are laws. It says you must not commit adultery, you must not murder, you must not steal, you must not covet, and whatever other command there is summed up in this saying. You must love your neighbor as yourself. Love does not work evil to one's neighbor. Therefore, love is law's fulfillment. So it was loving on that doctor's part to save that woman's life. That's love. All things are lawful, but not all things are advantageous. All things are lawful, but not all things are built up. And one by James of the same ilk. This is James 2:8. If you really keep the royal law found in the scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you're doing right. So even James recognized that love was the law. Now, if love is the law's fulfillment, then when you choose a loving action, such as donating blood platelets to save someone's life, you have fulfilled the law. You have done right. But if you do something unloving, such as refusing to help your child who is bleeding to death by denying him or her a blood transfusion, then you have violated the royal Christian law of love. It's a fact. In James' day, it was a loving thing to avoid offending the Judaizers by refraining from certain foods. That is why he recommended taking the course of action. But were we to understand this as a law binding on Christians in our day, prohibiting them from accepting life-saving medical procedures? Clearly not, as that would violate the law of love. But we have additional context from the Bible that makes this point even clearer. In Paul's writings, he explicitly states that James' recommendation about refraining from meat sacrificed to idols, given in the same breath as his decision to refrain from unbled meat, was not a law, and was something that he, as a Christian, could freely choose to ignore as long as he didn't offend anyone. It's all about blood in the meat. We're going to read it, 1 Corinthians 8:14-13. It's right from the Jehovah's Witness Bible. Now, concerning the eating of foods offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world. This is what Paul's saying, and there is no God but one. Nevertheless, there is not knowledge in all persons, but some being accustomed until now to the idol, eating food, something sacrificed to idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food will not commend us to God if we do not eat, or we do not fall short, and if we eat, we have no credit to ourselves. You see, it's not about the food, it's about our love to God. So, but keep watching, he says, that this authority of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone should see you, or having knowledge, reclining at a meal in an idol temple, will not the conscience of that one who is weak be built up to the point of eating foods offered to idols? Really, by your knowledge, the man that is weak is being ruined, your brother for whose sake Christ died. But when you people thus sin against your brother and wound their conscience that is weak, you're sinning against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat flesh at all, that I may not make my brother stumble. So this is not about Jehovah's Witnesses making each other stumble. This is counsel about the Jews. The Jews the Gentiles would go in and sit at a table in a temple and eat the meat. But if a Jew was present and said something, then you'd know his conscience was bothering him. So you'd refrain too, right? You know, that's what Paul said. You'd quit eating everything if it bothered someone. If you didn't like fish or whatever. You know, it's like anything in life. If you're doing something that bothers someone in your household, maybe your mate, are you going to keep doing it? No. You're going to use love, right? So that's really what Paul's talking about. He says you'd refrain from eating out of love. You know, you wouldn't want to stumble that guy, but it doesn't mean you can't eat it, because it has nothing to do with your relationship with God. Now, let's go on. 1 Corinthians 10:25-33, and I pulled this one in just so you guys can see that it's right from the Watchtower's Bible here. This is it, Watchtower's Bible. So here's what it says. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market, making no inquiry because of your conscience. So in other words, when I go into the grocery store, I don't have to be looking for byproducts and all those things on the label, like Jehovah's Witnesses taught us. We don't have to do that. We're not stumbling any Jews around us. There's no Jews. This is not about stumbling other Watchtower people, because their conscience is built upon wrong information. So they have to redo their conscience. There's nothing wrong with eat whatever is sold in the meat, making no inquiry because of your conscience. Verse 26, it says, for to Jehovah belong the earth and everything in it, and if an unbeliever invites you in and you want to go, eat whatever is set before you. making no inquiry on the count of your conscience. You see, Watchtower had us so worried about this blood thing that we were going to offend Jehovah. Like, they cherry-picked a few scriptures. We're all sheeple. We just follow the 9 men. We worship them. We're idol worshipers. I didn't know how to really do this research. I didn't know how to see this. But it's so easy to see. Why would you sacrifice your life to the Watchtower when the Bible says this? Because it's all based on blood and meat. Because that's how the Bible talks, right? And they're saying there's nothing wrong with it. Go eat the meat. Don't worry about it. I used to go to my folks' place, and I'd make my mom. I wouldn't eat the wieners she bought because there's byproducts. She'd cook up some hot dogs. I was a Jehovah's Witness. How insulting. I'm thinking back, and I can't apologize to my mom now because she's gone. But how insulting I was as a pompous Jehovah's Witness. I go out to the farm, my mom makes a meal, and I'm not going to eat it because I go in the fridge and check the labels on her wieners. That's insulting. And the Bible doesn't tell us to do that. Jehovah's Witnesses told us to do that. Their own Bible says if an unbeliever invites you in and you want to go, eat whatever's set before you, make no inquiry on the account of your conscience. But if anyone says to you, this is something offered to in sacrifice, do not eat it because of the one who told you and because of his conscience. You see? So if a Jew was sitting there, maybe they're really strict. They only buy kosher meat from Costco. No byproducts. The Jews. We used to buy a lot of meat from Costco, no byproducts, just because of that. And but here's what it's saying: if he's there, he might inquire. So you're not going to stumble that Jew, right? Because he really maybe believes in kosher meat, right? That's interesting. So he says, but if anyone says to you, this is something sad, do not eat it because of the one who told you of conscience. So Paul goes on to say, he says, I do not mean your own conscience, but that of the other person. For why should my freedom be judged by another person's conscience? Good point. Why should my freedom to live be judged by the Watchtower's conscience? It's right there in the Bible, folks. This is a valid argument. This is done by Watchtower Helper. He used to serve in Bethel with those cult leaders, and then he left. So if I'm a partaker with thanks, why am I to be spoken of abusively over that which I give thanks? Why? I give thanks. You see, I should have went to my mom's house, gave thanks like a proper Christian, and thanked my mom and gave her a big hug for making that dinner. Can you imagine how she would have felt? But I was working from down here. I was working from the Watchtower down here from hell. They call it the heel. When you're working from below, you're questioning everything. You're self-righteous and you're pompous, and that's how Watchtower clones their soldiers, their people. I know. I was one. So we're gonna keep going a little further here. Frank says, oddly enough, ours is the same conclusion reached by the Watchtower founder, Charles Taze Russell. So everything said this far, you can go way back, and Charles Taze Russell said the same thing. Watchtower's founder. You see, Watchtower apostatized from Charles Taze Russell. Charles Taze Russell died. Rutherford came in, and he was an apostate to what Charles Taze Russell started. You see, if you want to believe in spirituality, well, if Christ is up there running things, he inspired Charles Taze Russell. He started the religion. Rutherford usurped it, usurped the leadership, used his legal tactics, got in there, and he disfellowshipped or shunned all of the bearded Russellites, everyone that had a beard. And this is how this religion started. So let's look at what Russell said. And I think the Watchtower is now looking a bit at what Russell said regarding beards. They're allowing beards now. They should look at Charles Taze Russell regarding the blood doctrine. Here it is. The advice was that these abstain from, because Jews certainly would consider the eating of such meats as participations in the heathen idolatry. So it's about the Jews. Nevertheless, it was advisable that the Gentile Christians abstain from the use of their liberty in this direction, out of deference to the weaker brethren. Jews and Gentiles, who could not so deeply philosophize, and whose conscience might be injured. So they had weaker conscience, They didn't have the love belief in Christ, the Jews. A lot of them, some did. A similar thought attaches to the prohibition of these use of blood. To the Jews it was forbidden, and under his covenant it was made a symbol of life. To partake of would imply responsibility for the life taken. These prohibitions have never come to the Gentiles. This is what Russell's saying. This never come to the Gentiles, and that's how we understand it, because they had never been under the law covenant. But so deeply rooted were the Jewish ideas on this subject that it was necessary to the peace of the church that the Gentiles should observe this matter also. And that's when you see, you got to go back to that time. You had Jews and Gentiles in the same congregation. So you had to be considerate of what they grew up with. They grew up with bleeding the animal before they'd eat it. And that's what they grew up with. So they're telling the Gentiles, be considerate to their conscience. Now, if they did not wish to be contentious and cause divisions in the church, the Gentile brethren would surely be willing to restrain or sacrifice their liberty respecting these matters. And that's from the Watchtower, 1909, April 15th, page 117. It's all quoted here, folks. I'll pin this article. You can look at it. And here's Frank's final concluding comments on this particular paper. This is 1 out of 8. And he says, his successors have never given a convincing argument to the contrary. So the governing body today, they have apostatized from how this religion started. And they have today not given an answer to this question. Frank was there. He asked them in Bethel. They don't have an answer. But yet, they like martyring their members. They like their members to die for them, for their blood doctrine. It's not the Bible. This is the Watchtower's blood doctrine. They want people to die. And it's not even the founder's idea. The founder would have no part of this. Russell, he was all about love. And that's how the Bible reads. So, in short, there is no biblical law or principle applicable today to today's Christians against accepting whole blood or its constituent parts. And since there are no Jews today who would be stumbled by a Christian receiving a blood transfusion, there's no reason to restrain or sacrifice our liberty respecting these matters. You see, folks, there's no Jews out there that are stumbled by a blood transfusion. They just buy kosher meat at Costco and they don't eat blood byproducts in the meat. They want their meat bled. But all Jews will take a blood transfusion to save life. Well, there you have it. There's the argument. It's a good argument. And I think when Watchtower, they need to consider this. They know this. But my question is, why are they continually suing countries like Spain, for this? Why are they continually just on this blood thing and wanting people to die when there's medical treatments that can save them from hemorrhaging and stuff? Why? If you have the answer, I would like to see it in the comments, because I don't have an answer. But anyways, folks, until next time, let's do what Jesus did. Let's keep living our life with love. And that means that we respect life. That lady in Spain now, she has a whole life ahead of her, and she can practice love, and she can help people because she's still alive. So thanks to the medical people in Spain. Okay, folks, so that brings an end, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thanks again for watching. We appreciate your comments, your dislikes, and your likes. If you would like to support the channel, just press join and buy us a coffee once a month. Until next time, keep dancing, smiling, laughing, and most of all, keep loving those around you. And have a great day.
Produced by Fixing My Faith.